what people will do for a little entertainment system.
It's midnight.
I'm here for the PlayStation 2. The best entertainment system to hit the world. It's gonna be great.
These were the scenes before the release of the PlayStation 2. Everyone was excited. Everyone looked hyped. It felt like a true community. The anticipation of getting your hands on the new console was the greatest feeling in the world. You knew you had your hands on something new, something different, a new era. But in 2025, having a new console feels almost pointless. Why is that? There was a time when every console generation felt like a leap into the unknown. The late 90s and the early 2000s were something special. If you were there, you remember it. The dusty smell of freshly unboxed hardware, the jingle of startup screens that burned themselves into your memory, the glow of a CRT television as your world transformed in real time. It wasn't just that games looked better, they felt different, they played different. Every console wasn't just a technical upgrade, it was a great shift. The transition from the original PlayStation to the PlayStation 2 wasn't just higher resolution textures or smoother frame rates, it was about imagination taking new shape. Entire genres were born in that leap. Think about it, the original PlayStation 2 had already laid a strong foundation with games like Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Resident Evil, but these were at their core still experiments, ambitious visions bound by hardware limitation. Then came the PlayStation 2, and suddenly, 3D worlds didn't just exist, they were breathing. Animations were smoother, voice acting became more prominent, characters had facial expressions, lighting created atmosphere, worlds opened up, and most importantly, they invited you in, not just to play, but to explore, to feel, and to think. Games like Shadow of the Colossus weren't just action-adventure titles, they were artistic statements about solitude, sacrifice, and scale. GTA 3 didn't just let you run around a city, it gave you a sense of freedom never experienced before in a digital form. Metal Gear Solid 2 didn't just innovate stealth, it subverted expectations and playing with identity, perspective, even your understanding of the game itself. Each of these games felt like it was doing something no one had ever done before, and that is the key. Back then, developers weren't just optimizing, they were inventing. They were navigating uncharted territory, trying to figure out what video games could even be. The industry was full of risk takers, storytellers, artists, and engineers who weren't afraid to fail big in order to dream bigger. What's more is that players notice. Communities form not just around franchises but around the potential of games. You didn't just ask, is the game fun? You ask, what can this game teach me? What can I feel from this? What will I discover? Gaming magazines dissected level design and narrative structure like sacred texts. Forums lit up, it was about plot theories, hidden secrets, and whether the game meant something more than what was on the surface. Back then, when you bought a new console, it wasn't about backward compatibility or whether it could run Netflix, it was about the unknown. You didn't know what the next 5 years would bring, and that was one of the most exciting parts. Fast forward to today and compare that feeling. What was the cultural shift from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5 or from the Xbox One to the Series X? Did you feel anything? Probably not, other than the initial excitement of getting a new console, because we're not chasing the unknown anymore, we're chasing performance, and performance, while important, is not the soul of gaming. Of course, it's not that everything today is bad, far from it, but the frequency of bold innovation, the sense that we're stepping into an era that will redefine the medium, is almost gone from the mainstream. In the past, generational shifts introduced entirely new experiences. Today, they just refine old ones, more pixels, shorter loading times, crisper sound, but the core gameplay, the core ideas often feel like echoes from what we've already seen before. When the PS2 launched, it felt like a cultural movement. People lined up outside stores not just for a product, but for the promise of something revolutionary. It was less about consumption and more about wonder. Today, a new console launch feels like a tech rollout, a scheduled event, slick, well-packaged, pre-ordered, but not transformative. And maybe that's what we've lost. Not just innovation in game mechanics, but innovation in emotion. So when we say games are not evolving anymore, this is where it begins. Not with graphics, not with processing power, but with the slow, quiet death of curiosity. And unless we look back and understand how we got here, we won't know how to move forward. There's a strange contradiction at the heart of modern gaming. On the surface, things look better than ever. Games are running on 4K resolution, 120 frames per second with near photorealistic visuals and global illumination that mimics the behavior of light in the real world, water that ripples naturally, shadows move with the sun, and every texture is painstakingly detailed. But here's the truth. All of that polish is just a distraction. It's a cover, a beautiful mask for a creative standstill. Despite the technological marvels, we're seeing less variety in gameplay than we did 20 years ago. The mechanics, the loops, the goals, they've started to blur into one another, so much that if you stripped away the visual style of half of the AAA titles released in the past 5 years, they would become indistinguishable. Open world checklist? Is there. Crafting system? Check. Skill tree? Of course. Map full of icons? Obviously. Generic protagonist with a tragic past? Slap it in. The formula has become so entrenched that innovation now feels like a risk that no one wants to take. And that's because most of these games aren't designed to challenge your creativity or emotions. They're designed to keep you engaged just enough not to leave. Many modern titles are structured less like narratives and more like digital services. They're not built with an ending in mind, they're built to be platforms. Games don't even end anymore, they update, they expand, they monetize, and that shift from experience to service is where much of the stagnation begins. Instead of asking what new experiences can we give new players, studios ask how can we keep players inside the loop? Keep them playing, keep them grinding, and keep them buying. Progression systems have become hollow. You're not growing as a player, you're just watching numbers go up. Unlocks, XP, cosmetics, meaningless upgrades. They replace genuine challenge and creativity with artificial reward structures designed to exploit your attention. It's not about evolving gameplay anymore, it's about retaining engagement. The same principles social media apps are built on, dopamine and not depth. Most AAA titles today don't trust the player to be curious. They don't leave space for experimentation, for open interpretation, or for unscripted moments. Everything is handheld, narrated, marked on a map, and optimized to death. You're not exploring a world, you're following a to-do list. And yet when you watch trailers, it looks like progress. The lighting is better, the faces are more expressive, the cutscenes are movie quality, but once you're holding the controller, something feels familiar. You're not excited, you're comfortable. Too comfortable. Because you've done this before, and before that, and before that. It's not that the games are bad, they're just safe. Too safe. Risk used to be a defining feature of the industry. Studios would gamble millions on a new idea. Now, they spend hundreds of millions ensuring no one gets confused or lost or bored. And the results? Games that are flawlessly produced but soullessly designed. And that is the illusion. Better visuals, bigger budgets, but the same experience. It's like putting a high-performance engine in a car and then driving in circles. Impressive, sure, but you're not going anywhere. Of course, not all games fell in this trap. Some developers still push boundaries, but the dominant model, the one that dictates what gets funded, marketed, and remembered, is built on minimizing creative risk and maximizing financial return. And the most dangerous part is that we've accepted it. We've started confusing refinement with innovation. We've allowed smoother gameplay to replace smarter gameplay. We've accepted repetition as long as it looks next gen. If the only thing changing between generations is how good the puddles look, then what are we really evolving? Gaming didn't just stop evolving by accident, it didn't lose its soul overnight, and it definitely didn't become predictable simply because the audience stopped caring. It was a slow shift, so slow that most people didn't even notice happening. But behind the scenes, the system was changing. The first thing that went wrong was scale. As budgets ballooned, so did the stakes. A modern AAA game can cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop and market. But it's not just a game anymore, that's a corporate investment. And investors don't like risk, they don't like unpredictability, they like forecasts, spreadsheets, and formulas that can be repeated. As a result, studios no longer create with freedom, they create with fear. Every decision is now filtered through layers of corporate oversight. Executive producers, monetization teams, brand consultants, market analysis. Before a single line of code is even written, the question isn't what can we say with this game, but what can we sell with it? Innovation? It's not just discouraged, it's actively weeded out in pre-production. If a new mechanic or idea can't be modeled in a PowerPoint slide or proven with data from a previous success story, it often gets cut before it even gets prototyped. Then came the mergers and consolidations. Studios that once had their own identity, their own tone, their own rebellious spark were slowly being absorbed into corporate giants. EA, Activision, Blizzard, Tencent, Embracer, Microsoft. They've swallowed every single studio one after the other, turning once distinct voices into uniform sanitized brands. The consolidation comes with a cost, which is creative homogenization. There's less room for weird, messy niche ideas when your IP has to fit into a giant cross-platform marketing plan, and the result? 1,000 games with different names but the same corporate DNA. Meanwhile, on the developer side, the pressure is crushing. The culture of crunch, when developers work 60 to 80-hour weeks in the final months before release, is still rampant. And it's not just physical burnout, it's creative exhaustion. You can't create freely under conditions designed to extract, not inspire. The people who are actually making the games, artists, designers, writers, sound engineers, are often pushed to the edge, only to be laid off once the game ships. It's a cycle of burnout and displacement that destroys morale, kills continuity, and leaves teams constantly rebuilding from zero. And while that chaos happens internally, the external marketing machine keeps running, louder than ever. Hype has replaced substance. Games are now sold long before they're finished. The trailers comes first, then the pre-orders, then the collector's editions, all before the developers even know if the game will work. And when the game finally launches, often broken, unfinished, or incomplete, it's released anyway, because deadlines aren't about readiness, they're about shareholder reports. And the worst part? We've normalized it. We've accepted broken launches, day one patches, half-finished stories with the promises of fixes down the line. We've allowed business models to shape the art instead of the art shaping the business model. And then there's the platform bloat. The way games have been forced to accommodate not just gameplay but social features, cross-promotions, battle passes, season updates, real-time events, Twitch integration, esports potential, and the list goes on. At some point, the game itself stops being the focus. It becomes a vehicle, an excuse to build a live service funnel, an ecosystem, a storefront. The original vision gets buried under infrastructure. That's what went wrong. We stopped asking what a game could say and started asking what it could do for the bottom line. We stopped designing games to be meaningful and started designing them to be marketable. And in that shift, from expression to extraction, something essential was lost. Not because players stopped caring, but because the system stopped believing that games on their own were enough. If games are no longer evolving, maybe it's because we've been waiting on the wrong people to push them forward. We keep looking to studios, to consoles, to publishers. We hope the next big thing will come with a trailer, or a press conference, or a surprise announcement from a trillion-dollar company. But what if the next leap isn't technological? What if it's cultural? Because the truth is, we are not passive consumers of games. We shape the direction of the medium, whether we realize it or not. The industry watches us. It responds to what we play, what we share, what we criticize, and what we fund. It notices what we support and what we let slide. So if we keep rewarding familiarity, we'll keep getting copies. If we keep pre-ordering unfinished games, they'll keep shipping broken. If we only talk about visuals, performance, and graphics, then that's all we're gonna be having. But it doesn't have to be like this. We're already seeing the blueprint for change. When players crowdfund small weird projects with no publisher backing, it gave birth to games like Hollow Knight, Slay the Spire, Sea of Stars, games that didn't just do something different, but proved that different can work. When modders took broken or limited games and rebuilt them into something extraordinary, they reminded the industry that creativity doesn't need a budget, it needs freedom. When fans created communities not around loot drops or metas but around ideas, art, and emotion, they keep the culture of gaming alive, something that corporations can't manufacture. Even content creators, streamers, video reviewers play a part, not just in entertainment, but in shaping taste, in holding studios accountable, in amplifying voices from the edges of the industry. Every video that questions the status quo, every deep dive that dissects design, every honest critique that doesn't end in a promo code, that's resistance. And then there are developers, small teams, solo coders, artists who are still trying to make games that say something. Games that explore identity, grief, dreams, language, connection, Not for clicks, not for esports, but for meaning. They exist right now, but they're not headlining gaming showcases. They're buried beneath noise, beneath marketing, and beneath the endless scroll of trends. It's up to us to dig, to find them, to share them, and to tell others this is what gaming can be. And it doesn't stop there. We can ask more of the games we play. We can look beyond fun and ask, what does this game stand for? What does it want me to feel? What will I remember it in 10 years? Because the future of gaming isn't a graphics card, it's a mindset. And that mindset has to start with us, with players who care, with creators who challenge, with communities who believe that games can be more than content. They can be culture, they can be critique, they can be art. And art only evolves when its audience does. So if you're tired of seeing the same game with a different logo, if you're tired of the promises, the trailers, and the press releases, if you're tired of waiting for someone else to take the risk, then maybe the next sleep is yours. Gaming isn't dead, but something inside it is sleeping. And maybe it's been waiting for us to wake it up. Not with better graphics, not with another sequel, but with a different question. What kind of world do we want to play in next? Thank you for watching.